Hello, and this will be the first time that I will be recording a reading. The reason why I am recording this is because as a professional academic, I should be doing a lot of reading. Unfortunately, I haven't been doing that, so I need an excuse to read, and what better excuse than reading a book and presenting it to people. Now, if I am infringing upon anyone's copyrights, if you believe that I am infringing upon anyone's copyrights, please do let me know on the reply section below. But otherwise, I will choose a book and continue to read that until it is done. And the book that I will be recording for this book reading session is The Study of War, edited by Quincy Wright, and it's the second edition of the book that was published in 1965. And because it's just a casual reading, I will be dispensing with certain parts of the book, and because of that, I will be foregoing the foreword, and I will be starting with a preface to the second edition written by none other than Mr. Carl Deutsch. So without further ado, this is the preface to the second edition of Quincy Wright's Study of War, published in 1965. Here it goes. Man's history has long been a story of struggle against suffering and death. This struggle began when hunger and illness were no longer accepted as irresistible and foreordained by fate, when men began to act against them. Today, millions of men and women in medical work and medical research carry on this struggle against death. But today, war is a greater threat to human life than famine or disease. And in the entire world, only a few hundred or 1,000 men and women are engaged in serious professional research on what causes war and on how war could be abolished. Nothing less than this, the understanding of war and the possible ways to its abolition, is on the agenda of our time. War usually has differed from simple murder in that it has been large-scale, highly organized, long prepared in advance, and carried out with more costly and effective equipment, and in that it has killed more widely and with less foresight and discrimination. Moreover, war has been considered legitimate by many millions in most countries, who have seen it as good and right, or as a necessary means to a good end, or at least as a normal, expectable part of human life, recurrent in the past and unavoidable in the future. But today, as we know, man's instruments of death have become incomparably quicker and more powerful than his instruments of life. Limited and local conflicts with conventional weapons, guerrilla and counter-guerrilla wars, police actions, and civil strife with marginal support from abroad for one side or both, all these may well continue to occur for many years before they are brought under control. But an all-out war today would kill more people in a few hours than could be replaced in many years and generations. In the age of nuclear weapons, if we do not abolish war, war is likely to abolish most of us. In our time, research on the causes of war and ways to contain, control, and finally abolish all-out war has become an expression of mankind's will to live. War to be abolished must be understood. To be understood, it must be studied. No one man has worked with more sustained care, compassion, and level-headedness on the study of war, its causes, and its possible prevention than has Quincy Wright. He has done so for nearly half a century, not only as a defender of man's survival, but as a scientist. He has valued accuracy, facts, and truth more than any more appealing or preferred conclusions, and in his great book, A Study of War, he has gathered, together with his collaborators, a large body of relevant facts, insights, and far-ranging questions about war than any other man has done. A Study of War first appeared in 1942, during World War II, much as Hugo Grotius's book On the Law of War and Peace appeared in 1625 during the 30 Years' War. As Grotius's book became a basis for the study of what later became known as international law, so Quincy Wright's book marks the beginning of much that number of people engaged in this research. Oh, sorry about that. I skipped a line. Again. As Grotius's book became a basis for the study of what later became known as international law, so Quincy Wright's book marks the beginning of much that nowadays has become known as peace research. Although the number of people engaged in this research is still small, the public and private agencies concerned with it still few, and the material means devoted to it still scant, they are considerably larger than they were only a few years ago. If modern civilization is to survive, these all will have to become much larger in the future. I believe that this, in fact, will happen. As this happens, the importance of Quincy Wright's A Study of War is likely to increase. It summarizes carefully and clearly a large body of scholarship, research, and thought devoted during the half-century between 1890 and 1940 to the study of war and its causes. In particular, it gathers together the essentials of the discussions of these decades on the balance of power, on armaments and arms races, and on the role of the press and other mass media in maintaining or increasing warlike or peaceful moods. It brings together the intellectual work of those decades on the importance of international law for preventing or mitigating war, and on the actual and potential contributions of international organizations. In all these fields, A Study of War offers an unparalleled collection of relevant data and facts and a unique survey of the important literature. All this information is clearly organized and focused to one purpose, the understanding and control of war and its eventual prevention. This book offers the reader the best single foundation for the advanced study of international conflict that has appeared so far. Quincy Wright has done more than pile up information about war. He has developed a basic theory of war. Summarized and in drastically oversimplified form, it might be called in effect a four-factor model on the origins of war. Put most simply, his four factors are 1. Technology, particularly as it applies to military matters. 2. Law, particularly as it pertains to war and its initiation. 3. Social organization, particularly in regard to such general-purpose political units as tribes, nations, empires, and international organizations. And 4. The distribution of opinions and attitudes concerning basic values. These four factors correspond to the technological, legal, socio-political, and biological, psychological, cultural levels of human life, respectively. At each level, conflict is likely, and violent conflict becomes probable whenever there is an overloading or breakdown of the mechanisms or arrangements that have controlled the interplay of actions and actors at any level, and that previously have preserved some non-violent balance or equilibrium. Violence and war, according to Quincy Wright, are probable, and natural whenever adequate adjustments or controls on one or more of these levels are lacking. Peace, as he sees it, is an equilibrium among many forces. It is unlikely to come about by itself. It must be organized in order to bring it about, to maintain it thereafter, and to restore it after it has broken down. Whenever there is a major change at any level, culture and values, political and social institutions, laws, or technology, the old adjustment and control mechanisms become strained and may break down. Any major psychological and cultural, or major social and political, or legal, or technological change in the world thus increases the risk of war, unless it is balanced by compensatory political, legal, cultural, and psychological adjustments. Peace thus requires ever new efforts, new arrangements, and often new institutions to preserve the peace or to restore it after its partial or worldwide breakdown. The decades since 1942, the first appearance of A Study of War, have seen unparalleled changes sweep the world. These have been changes at all levels, in demography, in technology, in law, in cultures and values, and in social systems and in politics, and, consequently, the basic risk of war is now greater than ever. It follows that we must increase our efforts to create international organizations and practices capable of reducing this mounting risk of war to very low proportions. Wright's conception of these factors is such that the changes in each are conceived of as, in principle, measurable. Technological change can be measured by statistical data about the explosive power of bombs, about the speed and range of delivery systems, and about the total energy supply of the national economies behind each military establishment. Changes in attitudes and values held by the masses of the populations and in the possibly different values held by the elites of political decision makers may be measured by means of public opinion data and by the content analysis of major newspapers or by policy statements. Changes in the number and size of states of various types and in the number, scope, and observance of international laws, treaties, and organizations could all, in principle, likewise be noted. From such data, inferences could be drawn to estimate the speed and scope of processes increasing or decreasing the likelihood of uncontrolled large-scale conflicts and hence the size and power of the forces making for war or peace. These forces are seen as working behind and beneath the health or illness and the wisdom or folly of individual statesmen, leaders, or commanders. The decisions of such individuals still count for much in Quincy Wright's view of the world, but they must govern, either against or with, the current of large events made up of the changes of large systems and the changing values and actions of hundreds of millions of people. In the present age of dangerous transition, the problems before statesmen and peoples are in some ways similar to the difficult adjustments that European peoples had to make in the great transitions of the 5th and the 15th centuries, each of which, as Wright reminds us, was made successfully. As a pragmatically oriented thinker, Quincy Wright has sought more to be empirically comprehensive than to be mathematically elegant. At this stage of social science, his broad factors are not completely operational. They represent large categories and aspects of society and politics. Once we try to specify quantitative variables within each of these broad factors, their number soon becomes large and their analysis difficult. Much work is to be done here, but it will be aided and illuminated by Wright's grand conception. Details of this conception, applied to the historic past as well as to the present and future, fill hundreds of pages of A Study of War. They still furnish suggestions for research for years to come. Indeed, seeing the world in this manner, Quincy Wright has necessarily become one of the chief pioneers of modern peace research. In due time, more explicit, detailed, and sophisticated models will doubtlessly follow upon his path-breaking effort, but they will bear a debt to the work he has done. Okay, this is the third section of the preface to the second edition of A Study of War by Quincy Wright. But this book offers more than a fundamental education. It was and is a pathfinder in matters of substance, and its substantive concerns have been carried forward since the time of its first appearance in 1942. Quincy Wright himself did this by editing a volume on the world community in 1948, and by writing his important text on the study of international relations in 1955, which marked a significant advance in the use of quantitative data in a larger framework of analysis. His work on the study of conflict has been the pioneer for such later work as the continuing research by many scholars appearing in the journals Conflict Resolution and the Journal of Peace Research, and for such books as Kenneth Boulding's Conflict and Defense and Anatole Rappaport's Fights, Games, and Debates, and Strategy and Conscience. His chapter in A Study of War on the balance of power showed the way in which a balance of power system may gradually turn into an international or supranational community. His work on the nature and formation of supranational communities pointed the way both directly and indirectly to the whole stream of research and discussion that has led to such works as Ernst Haas's books, The Uniting of Europe and Beyond the Nation State, and to the work on international systems and on community formation of David Singer, Harold Gutzkow, and Amitai Etzioni, and he has had a substantial influence on my own thinking. Quincy Wright has also been a pioneer in the wide-ranging and concerted use of different methods of research. He has broadened and deepened the intellectual unity of the study of international relations. A Study of War draws upon a Study of War draws upon a prodigious volume of historical facts and judgments and a large arsenal of legal learning. At the same time, A Study of War was one of the first works to pay serious attention to the mathematical work of Lewis F. Richardson on the analysis of foreign policies and of arms races, wars, and other forms of deadly quarrels, quote unquote. Quincy Wright was one of the first scholars to make significant use of data from the quantitative analysis of communications, particularly of the press. Since then, this work has been carried forward by Harold Lasswell, Ithiel de Sola Poole, Daniel Lerner, and their associates. Wright pioneered in using large amounts of research results from what are now called behavioral sciences, quote unquote, particularly from psychology. He led the way towards systematic efforts at measurement in international relations. Above all, he never ceased in his efforts to integrate all kinds of evidence, historical, legal, behavioral, statistical, and mathematical, with the best political judgment to arrive at a balanced and comprehensive understanding of reality. And he never ceased insisting quietly, by the very implications of his work, that realistic political insight and responsible political ethics are profoundly relevant to one another. It is high time for the members of the new generation in American political science, and indeed in political science around the world, to become more deeply familiar with the work of Quincy Wright. They may have to put a little work into the effort, but they should find it worthwhile. If he were writing a study of war today, he would probably abbreviate some of the historical and legal arguments and integrate his behavioral and quantitative data into his main text rather than segregate them in appendixes where they were thought to be less of a stumbling block to some of his first readers in 1942. We have become a little less fearful of numbers and data since those years, but we can now appreciate all the better the boldness of Quincy Wright's design, and we can easily make the small effort to adjust ourselves to his form of presentation. As for me, I have found the effort abundantly rewarded. A Study of War is now available in 2 versions. The first, abridged by Louise Leonard Wright, aims at presenting the pith and essence of his thought, stripped of appendixes and hence of much of the supporting evidence. It should be useful for junior undergraduates, for all those who want to become acquainted with the outline of a major edifice of ideas, and for those who wish to use the abridged version as a guide on their way to the understanding of the full-length work. The second version is a reissue of A Study of War in full length, with all the data and appendixes and with the full indexes. This version, in my view, is indispensable for the serious graduate students. This version, in my view, is indispensable for the serious graduate student and, of course, the scholars, teachers, and researchers in political science, international relations, and all sectors of the social sciences that deal with war and peace. Serious undergraduates might also profit from using the full-length version. In any case, the full-length version should be owned, not merely borrowed. You will want to go into it often, to mark it up, to consult it for specific problems, and to reread it for thinking through once more your understanding of the field. Until now, to the best of my knowledge, the Nobel Peace Prize has never been given to a social scientist. In contrast to the policy of other Nobel Prize committees in other fields, the Norwegian Parliament has awarded mankind's highest honor for contributions to peace only to men of political action or to other persons engaged in popular persuasion. Recipients of the prize thus have usually been statesmen of national governments or international organizations, or else writers, educators, or natural scientists trying to influence popular attitudes. In regard to the social sciences, the pursuit of more knowledge about peace thus far has gone unnoticed and unhonored at the highest level. On the day on which this changes, on the day when the crucial role of knowledge and of social science in the search On the day on which this changes, on the day when the crucial role of knowledge and of social science in the search for peace will be more fully appreciated than it has been in the past, mankind may well remember the pioneering contributions of Quincy Wright. Thus ends the preface to the second edition of A Study of War by Quincy Wright. Thank you.